welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right. Hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. On this show, we interview a lot of recovering addicts. If you guys can follow us on Instagram, that's where we post most of our stuff and announcements and everything. It's at Hell Has an Exit on Instagram. We have a Twitter. We have a Facebook page, and now we are also live on YouTube. These are on YouTube at Hell Has an Exit. All right, so today I got my good friend, Matt G, and I've known Matt basically since I've been clean. You are one of the few people that got here that, like, when I got clean, you were like a predecessor, you know, still are, you know, but like you're one of the people that was like, all right, like this dude's cool. He's got J's on. He's tatted up. He's got a gold chain. You know, you had a pretty girl with you, and like you just made recovery seem cool. You know, it wasn't like what I thought recovery would be like when I first got clean, where it'd be like, you know, a bunch of old people just miserable. You know, like you were obviously having fun. You got an amazing message. I always love hearing you speak. I probably heard you speak more than you've heard me speak. So where did it all start for you?
I'm originally, you know, I was born up in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. You know, I come from a good family, man. My mom and dad, you know, got divorced at a, you know, young age. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I always share about this when I share my story, because I look back and I feel like, you know, this is where some of the dysfunction started in my life, you know, and, you know, my mom and dad divorced, and my mom was the enabler. You know, my dad he was very strict, you know, he'd been to the military. You know, the story I got was supposedly he was involved in some sort of a robbery or something. And back then they said, look, you can go to jail, go to prison, or go to Vietnam. And he chose Vietnam, and the military helped him, you know, and got him out of his little environment. And I guess that's what worked.
How old were you when they got divorced?
2 years old.
Okay. But is that when, like, you think like you started to feel different because your parents were separated?
Yeah. I mean, looking back, like not having a stable father figure in the house, I noticed that from doing, you know, a little bit of step work and stuff like that, like looking back on my past, like I feel like that's where some of the behavior started, you know? I always say, man, like I was an addict before I ever put any drugs in my body, man. My first addiction to me was stealing, you know? It started when I was a little kid. I remember in this area called Greenbelt, Maryland, and I stole like a little piece of gum from the little corner store, you know, and I just remember that high of getting over, you know, and that started it. And I started stealing from my mom and my brother, like little bits of change and money. And that's where I think my addiction started to take off.
Did you ever get in trouble like at that time for stealing?
I mean, I remember.
Or you got away with it for the most part? I
got away with it a lot of times. Yeah. I remember one time my brother, you know, figured out that I was stealing change out of his like little, he was older than me.
His piggy bank or whatever?
Yeah. And he got mad, you know, and I remember him getting upset with me, but I did it anyway. Yeah. It's just, once it started, it didn't stop, you know, and it definitely progressed. Like when I was younger, I remember, you know, I had a learning disability and I felt different. You know, I remember being in school and not being able to read as good as the other kids. And then, you know, reading in front of people, I really struggled with it. You know, I look back at that time and I got put in like, that was like when like the SLD classes first started in school, you know, they didn't really know. And like I was in special classes with kids that were way worse off than me, you know, that had like other mental illness, you know, issues. And I just remember not feeling like I fit in and, you know, not going into the regular classes with the regular kids at school really affected the way I felt. I even remember like some of the kids, like I said, some of them are really, you know, pretty bad off. And there was a few of us in the class that were like, you know, we were somewhat normal kids, you know, and we'd end up standing up for these kids that had like, some of them, you know, had some serious mental illness, you know, and other kids in school were mean and they would tease them. They'd tease us too, you know?
Yeah.
I definitely had that complex. Like you'll hear addicts say it all the time, like they never felt like they fit in. Man, I never felt, good enough, even to this day. It still comes up in my life.
Sure.
Yeah, my mom ended up getting a job down here in Florida, and we ended up moving to North Miami when I was like 8 years old.
Okay.
And I lived there for about a year or so. I acted up a lot in that time. I remember looking back now, like I have kids, and like I look back now, and like the things that I was doing on a daily basis was not, I would say, normal, And
like what, you were drinking and smoking already?
Yeah. I had already like started smoking cigarettes. I had started, drinking a little bit, and I was doing what I saw. My mom was single. She had parties at the house. My mom always worked 2 jobs for many years. So her second job used to be a bartender. So she always had like full liquor at my house. Seeing them smoking and drinking, I knew, when they'd go out back with weed, I knew what it was already at 8 years old, I was just doing what I saw in my environment.
When your mom would catch you smoking, would she like flip out on you, or she just like roll her eyes or whatever?
I don't know. I can remember a time when I was very, very young, and I remember I was looking at the cigarette. She was like sitting there doing her makeup, and she goes, "Go ahead."
Wow.
And I remember I hit it and the cigarette, and it made me cough, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
I got in a lot of trouble that year when I was 8, and
so what happened with your dad? He was still in Maryland?
He lived in Virginia.
Okay.
And I would go see him, like visit him in the summertime and like Christmas time, when I wasn't in school. Yeah, that whole year, man, I got in a lot of trouble. And I always say, like, I didn't have him close by, so I really started acting out, because I didn't have to deal with him, and his discipline. My mom, after that year, she ended up saying she couldn't control me and I was out of control. And she said that she was going to send me to live with my dad. So that's what she did. Like, we got a saying, like, wherever you go, there you are, and I ended up going back down there with my dad. And I remember still getting in trouble, still stealing, still smoking cigarettes, still doing the same thing, at that age. And I'm definitely grateful for the time, those few years that I stayed with my dad. When I was 11, I had come home from summer. I was home on summer break, from school, and I had visited my mom in Florida, and then we ended up going to, went back up to Virginia to my dad's, and I was only back for a couple of days, and I remember he came home from work that day, said he didn't feel good, and ended up he thought he had the flu, and he ended up having a heart attack and passing away, like right in front of me. I was, I was 11 years old.
So he was sick at the house, and then he was saying that he didn't feel good, and then he had a heart attack in front of you and died?
Yes. Wow. He literally came home from work that day. He actually played golf that day. He liked to play golf. Came home. He said he didn't feel well. I remember him telling me, I think I got the flu. And I remember him splashing water in his face at the sink. And then he went and sat on the couch, and I guess he had like a massive heart attack.
Wow.
And
you were by yourself?
Yeah.
You had to call the cops and everything?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was. I always share about this. Whenever I share my story, I used over that. I had a lot of feelings of like, did I do the right thing? Did I react quick enough? And the truth of it is, I was an 11-year-old kid. I had no idea what to do. No kid is supposed to be, in that situation.
Yeah.
And I held on to that for many years until I did some step work and like processed it, After that, my mom, sent me I remember, again, not feeling like I fit in, man. She told me, like, you're not crying enough. You're not mourning this enough. She sent me to like a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and, all these people I talked to. And, I was just a kid, man. Didn't know how to feel, didn't know what, I just lost my dad. I didn't know what to do.
You feel like the therapy helped at all, or you were just like so young, you didn't even know what the fuck was going on?
I don't think I knew what was going on, man. Yeah. I was just that young, Yeah. So obviously, after he passed, I ended up moving back to North Miami, and I was 11 years old then. And from there, we ended up, moving up to Broward County. And, right away, man, I ended up...
Did you like Broward more than Miami? More than Dade? Or you didn't really care?
It's weird to say this. When I moved to Broward, man, it was like there was nothing around where my house was. Like,
where'd you guys live?
Flamingo and 595.
Wow.
And there was no 595.
What? The highway wasn't even there?
No.
Get out of here.
No.
What year was this?
1986.
Jesus, 1986. Wow, there was not even 595 wasn't even built.
No, Flamingo.
Holy shit!
Flamingo Road was a dirt road.
No, it wasn't. Really?
Yeah.
Flamingo Road was a dirt road, literally?
Yeah, I literally moved.
Holy fuck.
I moved from Virginia, and you think in your mind, Virginia's country.
Yeah.
And I remember moving to Plantation and telling my mom, why are we moving to the country?
Wow.
Like it was in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
You know, it wasn't developed like it is now.
Holy shit, that's crazy.
Yeah, I ended up hanging out. You know, I always say this, mom knows best. And I remember hanging out with this, you know, group of guys that I met at school, and they lived just west of my house, you know, in the trailer park. And I remember meeting these guys at school. You know, I remember my mom saying, like, you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, you know? And I was like, you don't understand. They're my friends, you know? These guys became my boys. I grew up with them. I always share this, man. None of us had dads. You know, I look back on that
all of
time.
you guys didn't have dads.
Yeah, there was, I think out of the group of like 10 guys, there was like 2 of us that had dads, you know? You know, looking back at that time, man, I definitely say like we went down, like we did the normal stuff. Like we played football and baseball and like went to school and did that. The stealing, man, started, you know.
All of you guys.
Yeah,
stealing.
we were stealing bicycles, and then before you know it, we're breaking into cars, and then, you know, before I knew it, we're stealing the cars.
Where are you guys? So who taught you how to hotwire a car? You take the keys.
It's funny, like I knew this older kid that kind of talked us through it, you know? And we just...
He sponsored you guys.
Yeah, he sponsored us into stealing cars. Yeah. And then what's funny is we would steal the cars, and then we could bring him some parts or, you know, stuff like that. Like that's where it started. And
I just found it. How old were you stealing cars?
Like 15.
15 stealing cars?
Yeah, didn't have a driver's license.
So back then, like, what would you break the window, or would you like unlock it with
Sometimes,
like a jimmy thing?
Yeah, there was a way you could pull the window out and, you know, like reach in. We were kids, so like, you know, we're small, so you could if you could have one guy pull the window out, one guy could reach in and grab the lock.
And then like, how much would you sell the car for? Like a chop shop, or you just joyride?
Joyride most of the times. You know, we just destroy somebody's car, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember we'd be like by IKEA, and you'd be like, oh man, we used to steal cars and dump them in that lake right
in the
there.
lake, yeah.
Wow.
That's funny. We started doing that, and, you know, the drugs, you know, came in also around that time. And yeah, I was like every normal kid, man, started smoking weed and just progressed, you know, did a little bit of everything.
Were you getting better in school, or was school still hard for you?
School, man, I stayed. Math was always good for me, but the other subjects, I didn't like read and comprehend well. So no, I never did good in school. When I was around 15, right before I turned 16, I got in all this trouble, like stealing cars. I got brought home in a stolen car by the police at 15 before I ever had a driver's license. So my mom sent me to live with a friend of mine up in northern Florida in this town called Crystal River. And I did okay up there. I ended up coming back, man, and, you know, basically just quit school. I think I did 9th grade twice in 2 years. I failed 1 year. I think I went 30 days 1 year, 60 days another. I was skipping school so much, just hanging out. And so I would, you know, beat the truancy officer. I'd go first and second period and then just leave every day. School just didn't work for me. I tried to get a GED, never, you know, did it. And then, you know, me and my friends, we started, you know, selling weed and trying to do the hustle thing, you know, and that's where, like, I think my drug use really took off.
Did you fall in love with weed when you first started smoking it?
Of course. Yeah. I said for years, man, my buddies will tell you that grew up with me, like they had tried coke when we were like 16 and like I wouldn't do it. I knew I was an addict. I remember saying, I'm an addict. I know if I do that, I'll never stop doing it.
Wow. How did you know that?
I don't know.
You just knew that you were like, that you had a difficulty like controlling your impulses.
Yeah. I had definitely a fear. I had a cousin of mine, her husband got on cocaine real bad, and he ended up committing suicide. He committed suicide, you know, and that always stuck with me. Like, you know, if you do drugs, you know, I don't know.
You'll go crazy. Like,
yeah. So I knew that it was, you know, I was an addict. So yeah, around that time, I was living with my mom, selling drugs, didn't have a care in the world, you know.
Would your mom say anything, or she was just like, whatever?
My mom was the mom that was like, oh, you guys can smoke weed and drink here because I know you're safe, you know? So my house was the hangout. My mom always would cook for everybody. She knew all the kids in the neighborhood, all my boys. She knew what we were doing, you know? She knew the stolen car. She knew all that stuff. So she ended up meeting this guy that, was real rough around the edges. His name was Wild Bill. Supposedly, he was supposedly in recovery for 7 years before he met my mom, and that kind of went out the window. My mom was like a functioning alcoholic. Yeah. He drank like crazy, and his name was Wild Bill. His name kind of says it all. He was a handful. He would tell you how it was real quick. He, I guess, had been to prison for trafficking cocaine, and this is somebody that my mom would never be with. If you knew my mom was not like that. My mom was very by the book, my mom never got a speeding ticket, broke the law. She was very by the book. He was very different, man. And he told me and my friends, he said, all you guys ain't shit. He's like, I remember him telling me that, if you continue doing what you're doing, because he knew that I was selling drugs and stuff. He said, you're going to end up in prison and end up a drug addict. And he said, all these guys that you think are your friends, they're not your friends. They won't even be there for you. I used to think he was crazy, Looking back now, I noticed he was the first father figure that came into my life that, he was like the first guy that put down on me, and said since my dad, you're a little punk kid, and kind of just told me how it was. And he was just trying to guide me a little bit. When I look back now, I did the whole "you're not my dad" thing, and we just really bumped heads. And anyways, he ended up, I knew something was up with him, my mom was with him for 3-4 years or whatever. I remember he started nodding out a lot, and I just thought he was drunk, passed out,
Gotcha.
And later I found out he was doing Dilatas, shooting Dilatas. I don't know. I guess it was about a year that he was doing those. And one day, the story I got is one day he couldn't get Dilatas, so he ended up going to Opelika and he got heroin. He ended up ODing and dying in my house.
Wow.
So here it is again. Yeah.
You found him?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So here it is 10 years later. I'm 21 now. I was 11 when my dad died. And so 10 years, goes by. So I relive all these feelings over again, from my dad. I learned that from doing some step work, So I ended up going off the deep end after he died. I saw him, same thing as my dad, found him, me and my mom, and it's trauma. You know what I mean? There's no other way to explain it. And after that, man, I went off the deep end. I ended up, up until that point, I was 21 years old. I had never really done coke and heroin or any of that stuff. And dude, I just went off to the races, man. I tried coke and heroin. I was snorting, and within
right away.
Yeah, within 6 months, dude, I was smoking crack and shooting heroin.
Wow. So how did you get introduced to all that stuff? Were you hanging around with people that were doing that?
Yeah. It's weird, man. Me and my boys, we all kind of sold drugs, and I had buddies, that I grew up with since day one that they sold coke and were selling pills, Percocets. And like I said, man, some of my buddies were already doing it. My buddy that I smoked crack with, man, he had been smoking crack, and just, I grew up with him, and he was just, my buddy's brother. And we just ended up, riding out together.
Were you into cars then?
Yeah.
Or you got into cars later?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'd always been into cars. Always had.
I remember you showing me pictures your lowriders.
Yeah. I mean,
I didn't even know people in Florida had lowriders.
Yeah, it's funny.
I went to this car show a couple weeks ago, and they had all these lowriders, and it was from Hollywood. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, I thought it was LA Hollywood.
25th Street. Yeah. That's my buddies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at this car show, and there was 25th Street, Hollywood, lowrider gang. And I remember being like, why would people ship their cars from California to this car show? But it's Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah, there's a huge lowrider scene here now.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
What's crazy is because...
You had one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
I had a car that was in Lowrider magazine back
really?
Yeah, back in the day, 1994.
All financed through selling drugs?
No.
Oh, okay.
I my dad died when I was 11, and I ended up inheriting a little bit of money when I turned 18. I always say I think that I just thought that I was Snoop Dogg or something, and I ended up buying this old car and put triple gold Daytons and candy paint and hydraulics. And, you know, that's where my love started with the cars, man. I've always since then been into cars. You know, I built that car and it's just snowballed as I got older, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up, you know, trying the drugs and dude, I got introduced to, you know, the court system right away. I got caught up in a sting and I got caught, you know, buying crack, and, you know, I got sent to all these rehabs and I was in drug court for, I think it was 3 years. You're supposed to complete it, I think, in a year or something like that. And I never got out of the first phase, man.
Yeah.
In that 3 years, in that 3 years, I just never stopped using, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever hear about the 12 steps?
Yeah. So when I got, you know, introduced to drug court, they kind of, you know, said, hey, you got to go to meetings, get your paper signed. And that's where I started, you know, to learn about 12-step fellowship. You know, I never believed it worked. You know, you
would go to all these meetings and think they're full of shit.
Yeah. I would just go there, get my paper signed, because the probation officer said that if I didn't, I was going to go to jail. So I would just go there and get my paper signed and leave. I wanted nothing to do with anybody in there. I never felt like I was like any of those people, and just kind of kept it moving, you know. And, you know, in that 3 years that I was in drug court, I went to multiple treatment centers. I did some rehabs. They actually have like jail programs. I did 3 different jail
SAP
programs. Yeah, I did SAP. There was like a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90-day, like a ATEC program or something. I forget what it was called, but I did all that stuff, you know, and I do real well, like in the controlled environment. Like I always say I'm a good inmate, you know? But, you know, I always used when I got out. I never listened to what they said. I never would go to like a meeting and ask for help, you know? In the end, for me, man, I was, you know, I was homeless.
So wait, you know, let's go. Like, how did it all progress? So like at 21, you're shooting dope and smoking crack. Like, did using needles like scare you at all? Or were you just like, fuck it, whatever?
Honestly, I was just like, whatever, man. You know, this girl, I snorted for some time. You know, it was probably 6-7 months, you know. I'd snort coke, snort heroin. I remember I smoked crack before I like really started snorting heroin. I had snorted heroin here and there. The crack would just, you know, it just takes all your money. So, you know, I would,
it does.
The things that I did to my mom smoking crack, I mean, you know, I joke, you know, my mom gave me a medallion one time at a meeting, and she like prepared this speech, and she said, you know, like she'd catch me G.I. Joe crawling across her bedroom to get into her purse, you know. She would joke that she would keep her keys around her neck, like on a lanyard, and I would somehow get the keys to go smoke crack, you know, like, you know, I just became like a monster, man, a slave to the drug. When I tried the heroin, it was like, okay, I could spend $10 a day and chill
and still go to work.
Yeah. And like somewhat function. In the end though, man, like I'm the addict that can't function, you know, I just cannot. So yeah, like I got out of the drug court thing, and I'd been to jail, I think a handful of times. I had been on house arrest. I had, you name it, you know, I tried everything, went to these treatment centers that they, you know, court ordered me to, and nothing ever worked. I ended up burning every bridge here in Broward County, man, like friends, my mom, my girlfriend, her family, like I stole from everybody, you know, and I ended up, my brother is a normie. He doesn't, you know, use anything, and he's very successful in life. He took me in, and I had a buddy that lived up there in Orlando where my brother lived, that lived here, that we used to shoot dope together. And he was like, hey, Matt, come to Orlando. You can get on methadone. It'll change your life. And I tried that. Like I said earlier, wherever you go, there you are. And I ended up, you know, using and stealing from my brother and got kicked out of there. And in the end, man, I came back down here in South Florida. I was running the streets. I ended up being homeless, you know, in like Opelika, Carroll City area.
How old were you?
I was like 24, 25.
Damn, 24 and being homeless? That's so wild.
And you know, the saddest part is, man, I always say this, like I had a good home to go to, you know, like when I started my story, like I come from a good family. Yeah. You know, I just chose to live in Opelika because the dope hole was right there, you know, and you know, back then they didn't have dope here in Broward. Yeah, everybody had to go to Miami. That's what it ended up doing. And every day, all I did was steal, you know, like I would go to Home Depot or Walmart, Kmart, Best Buy. You could give me a list of stuff and we were, running out the emergency exits, me and my buddy, stealing stuff, and we get like half the price, for whatever we stole. Every bit of the money would go to dope. At the end of the night, I didn't have no money. I remember going to this corner store. It was like a little Shell gas station on 826 and 27th Ave. And I remember begging for a quarter from people getting gas, so I could just go get like a little cup of soup so I could have something to eat at the end of the night. I was like 140 pounds, I was taking a shower underneath a hose behind this guy, Frank's house. He was kind of nice enough to let me stay in his backyard. He had like a couple of old broke down cars. He had like a bigger backyard. So he'd let us stay back there, Another kid that I kind of grew up with was homeless down there too, and that was my everyday life, man. I ended up racking up a bunch of different charges from stealing. So I had a bunch of charges in Broward and a bunch of charges in Dade. And I just remember, man, when they put the handcuffs on me, man, it was like a sense of relief. You'll hear people say like, I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. Yeah. And that was me, man. And I remember feeling like relieved.
What was detoxing in jail like? Because I know you probably had like a crazy habit at that time.
Yeah, it was the worst. I always say, man, I did 10 bags a day. That's where I was at. Plus, I was doing 10 bags a day plus a little coke and smoking crack. Shooting coke and crack. So it was terrible. I can look back on those times, man. I did the detox in jail thing a few times, and by far, man, it's like it's terrible. It's also knowing that you can't get out. It's almost a little easier than sitting in your room trying to
do it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was it. I ended up going to jail, and I remember knowing I'm going to go to prison. I remember telling, I had a girlfriend at the time. I remember telling her, I'm not going to be in here for 6 months. I'm going away. I ended up I got sentenced to 2 years in prison, and I ended up sitting in the county for a long time, man. I ended up being in the county for almost 2 years, and then I ended up going to prison, for
you were in the county for 2 years?
I did like 11 months.
So for people who don't know, can you explain the difference between like the county jail and like prison?
Yeah. County jail, you're just in like a room, like a pod. They have like a pod that has rooms in there, and
everyone gets their own room. There's like Tempur-Pedic mattresses.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's usually 2-man. There are some 2-man rooms, and then there's some 3-man rooms. I did a lot of time in a place called North Broward, and that was you're basically just you have your own cell, and then you have like a day room, they call it, and there's like some metal picnic tables and a TV, and some telephones on the wall, and everybody's screaming and yelling, and the food's terrible, and if you're lucky enough to have family to send you some money for commissary, you may have like you get some cookies and some junk food to eat and have some comfort. But also Dade County Jail, I did 11 months in Dade County Jail. I was at this one facility they have called Metro West, and it's an open dorm. So there was like 100 guys in just like a huge room
with bunks in the room
with bunk beds alongside the walls, and they're just metal bunk beds with these little, mats that you sleep on, and it's terrible, it's jail. That's what it is. When I went to prison, man, I remember saying this, like, it was like you had something to do, It's the same scenario, they have an open dorm, or they have like a T building, that is what they call it when you get to prison. I was in both, and you get to go to the yard, there's drugs, I got weed right away, when I was in prison.
You still don't have any thoughts of getting clean?
Nah. I even had a homeboy.
So crazy. You were in jail for 2 years in the county, and you still were just like, whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's rare. Most people don't do more than that doesn't happen. A lot of people do 2 years in county. That's like some people say they'd rather do like 3 years in prison than like
any day.
Yeah,
any day. Knowing what I know now, when I finally got to prison, I did so much county time that they gave me credit time served for all the time that I had. But I ended up, being in prison for like 7-8 months, And prison was way easier. You work every day. I worked in the kitchen, so it keeps you busy. You kind of get functioning, you get a routine. I just go to the kitchen, work,
They have weights in there?
No weights, but we did like calisthenics, like push-ups, pull-ups, dips, and that's what I did every day. I worked out, went to the yard. A lot more freedom in prison, I always say this too, man, like even without like a 12-step program, like I started to feel good about myself being away,
From the drug.
Yeah.
Even though you're still smoking weed.
Yeah. And I didn't, and then like, don't get me wrong, man, I smoked weed a couple times. It wasn't like I was like,
Chiefing it up.
Yeah, I wasn't, you can't get in, you could if you have enough money, but I finally felt good about who I was. I could stand up for myself. I gained a little bit of weight, I started to build a relationship back with my mom, and life for the most part was okay. I remember, when I got out, man, I did what I always did. I used. And for some reason, man, I always say like we cross like an imaginary line when we're getting high, man, where it's not getting high no more. It's just like, it's like a mission, and it becomes a full-time job, and I knew something was wrong. I don't know. I can't explain it. I think the break from being in the county and prison for so long that I started to feel good about who I was as a person. I started to get back to that real me, and when I used, man, it robbed all my ambition again and took all my energy. And I didn't like the way I felt. I ended up going to a detox, and trying to get clean. And, I had been to this place before, and the doctor just wasn't having it, and I was with some girl, and he ended up like telling me like, hey, look, we don't take couples. And he said, like, give her a chance. You've been here multiple times, you know what to do. And for some reason, man, I let her go in and I didn't. And then I ended up going to another place that I had been to before. I had been to this detox like 5 years prior, and there was a tech there. I knew he was in recovery, and just from the way he talked, he had been where I've been, and he basically just like kind of talked to me, man, on my level, and he kind of convinced me he wanted me to go to a treatment center. And I remember the specific treatment center that he asked me to go to. I had been there before, and it's a locked door. You can't leave. And I was like, look, I just got out of prison 3 weeks ago. I'm not going anywhere where there's locked doors. So he had a outpatient program that they were affiliated with. And he's like, look, you can go to this place. And I was like, that sounds good, man, but my car's messed up. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And he's like, well, we have a referral service that'll pick you up every day and bring you here. So every excuse I had, he had the answer. I can honestly say, man, when I went to this place, I just wanted to stop shooting dope and smoking crack, I wanted to go back to the good old days when I drank and smoked weed and just
did
chill.
Some ecstasy at the club.
Yeah, the good, fun times.
I've only done ecstasy in a club like one time, and I smoked crack right after. But like when I got clean, I would keep thinking that, like, man, I wish I could just like be on ecstasy at a club. That's what my brain tells me. That's never happened. So
I ended up going to this outpatient, and I can honestly say, looking back now, like I for the first time in my life, I said to myself, I've used in every facility I ever been in, even jail, prison, treatment centers, everything. I've always figured out a way to use, whether it be psych meds or get something smuggled in or drink or whatever. So I said to myself, I need to give myself a chance. Let me give this a shot, because I knew if I kept using, I was going to end up in prison for a long time. I had like a pretty lengthy record, and they told me the last time I got in trouble that I was violent habitual offender, and if I get in trouble again, I'm gonna get 15 years or more. And that didn't sound appealing to me, So I gave it a shot. And for the first time, I honestly said in my mind, not lip service to my mom or my girl or my friends, I'm gonna give this a chance. So that's what I tried to do. Somehow or another, man, it like one day turned into another day, and I kind of got clean, I ended up going to a 12-step, meeting, and outside of that treatment center, and my life kind of took off. I kind of did what they told me to do in those meetings. I slowly but surely, like, I ended up getting a job the day I got out of IOP. I never worked in my life, really. I always sold drugs, or when in my addiction, when it was real bad, I was the guy that would work one place for 1 week or 2 weeks. As soon as I get my paycheck, I'd go smoke crack with it, and they'd never see me again, you know? So I had a little experience in everything, you know? So I ended up getting a job, man, working construction for this guy. And, you know, I was like remodeling houses and busting my ass every day. And, you know, I think I made like $7.50 an hour, you know, and it was just a piece of humble pie that I needed, and it kept me busy. I try to tell all the guys that, you know, are in recovery now, I'm like, look, in the beginning, stay busy, get a meaningless job that, you know, doesn't require any stress on your end, you know, and just focus on your recovery. You know,
scoop ice cream, construction, pizza, like something basic as fuck.
Yeah.
No stress.
Most of these guys want to come into recovery and like
call center, start a business, open a halfway house.
For sure,
it's insane. It's crazy. I know, because when you tell people to take it slow, they're like, oh, I gotta make up for all this lost time, and they start looking at everyone else, and you know, they got a haircut. You know, man, they have so much energy put in the wrong place.
For sure.
And I'm always just like, the turtle wins the race. Like, I just see a lot of rabbits, you know? And it's like that slow and steady mentality, that cockiness. Oh, I'm not going to use. That's the first person to use, you know? Like that. Oh, I'm never going to get high. Oh, da-da-da. You know, it's like, I don't know. You know, you only have so much energy when you really focus it. People underestimate how much energy it's going to take to stay clean and how much energy can be put into recovery. They think if you went to the meeting with all the guys from the halfway house, they did everything they could. But it's like there's meetings, there's calling your sponsor, there's reaching out to people that are your predecessors, there's reading the book, you know, getting a service commitment, so much more things. And they kind of just feel like, well, I bought gym shoes, I don't need to go to the gym.
Yeah. I definitely, like in that beginning phase, man, I got with the right sponsor, you know, and I had a group of guys that like, I had this one guy in particular, you know, like he had been to prison for a long time, and I related to him, you know, because I was literally like about, you know, a month or so out, you know, and if it wasn't for those guys, man, I don't think that I would have stayed clean, you know, and like I said, I started working and recovery started happening without my permission, you know. I started, you know, it's crazy, man, like. You put down the drugs, you know, and take that away. It's like, I try to tell people all the time, you know, like addicts are great people, you know, they're just bad. We're just bad when we use drugs. You know what I mean? It really is like the most genuine people I've ever met are in recovery, you know, and they'll do anything for you to help you, you know, but that first year, man, I don't know what happened, man. I didn't do everything they told me to do, but I did most of it, you know, and I didn't use, and I just went to meetings.
What was recovery like back then compared to now?
It's way different, man. You know, like in the meetings, there was a lot more old timers. You'll hear people say now, you know, like it's the easier, softer way. Yeah. You know, and they used to tell us, you know, like work the steps or die, motherfucker. Yeah. You know, and it was harsh. Like they didn't say it like jokingly. It was like, you know, serious, you know, you'll hear people say like, you know, go to raise their hand and try to talk, and their sponsor would tell them like, hey man, we don't want to hear from you, you know.
Some kid would cry.
Sit down and be quiet, you know, listen, you might learn something, you know, and like, exactly nowadays, like these, you know, a lot of these guys, you know, they get offended by everything. Yeah. You know, I came in on the ass end of that. You know, I've been clean for a while, you know. And
how many years you have now?
18 years.
18, damn, that's sick.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. So it was different, way different. A lot more old timers. People were more, I always say addicts are controlling, you know. They controlled the meetings differently. You know, they ran the meeting. They didn't let the meeting run itself, you know, and things were just a little different, you know.
Yeah, I feel like back then, like the people with clean time ran the meeting, and the people with like little clean time kind of like you may be able to share one or two things, but that was about it. Now I feel like a lot of old timers, even like myself, sometimes when I go to meetings, I don't really feel like sharing. I kind of let the other people share, you know, because I don't know. I don't know what's happened. And like I used to share every single night, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then over the time, I've just kind of like, I sit back more. I don't share at every single meeting. Yeah. I don't share that much in meetings anymore like I used to, you know, but sometimes I feel like maybe I should. You know?
For sure. I remember my sponsor used to tell me he would say, hey, what meeting did you go to tonight? And I would say, I went to this meeting. It sucked. He said, what'd you participate in? And, you know, what'd you bring to the meeting? Yeah. I didn't share for years. Now I'll share, you know. I try to be available, you know, to the new guys and let them know recovery works, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot harsher back then, though.
Yeah. So I ended up working that first year construction. And I think for the first time in my life, I started to learn a little bit of like responsibility and integrity. You know, I'd never done any of that. You know, I definitely chased my recovery like I chased my drugs. You know, I would work all day and go to meetings.
Yeah.
You know, my home group at that time was a 10 o'clock meeting at night. And, you know, I was out till midnight every night of the week, you know?
Yeah, I was talking to my boy the other day, and he's like just getting clean. And I was like, yo, I'm going to go to this meeting. We're going to go out to eat after. He's like, oh, man, I worked all day. I'm tired. I'm just like, and it's hard because I don't want to be that guy like super pushy and like judgmental either. But it's like, you thought, like, what did I do all day? You thought I just like slept in all day? Like, I worked all day too, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm grateful that in early recovery, I took it really slow because I've instilled and ingrained habits. Like, it's a habit for me to go to meetings now. You know, I might not go to 5, 6 a week, but I still hit 3 meetings a week. You know,
Me too.
I still,
Me too.
and like, it's very, like, you don't need to like twist my arm to go to a meeting. Like, if you hit me up and like, you want to go to a meeting tonight, I'll go. You know, it doesn't take a lot of convincing for me to go. If like someone's going, I'll go with them, you know?
Yeah. I think for guys like you and me that have been clean as long as we have, it just, we built that foundation in the beginning. And I definitely, you know, that first year, that's where I learned that. You know,
sure.
They say go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I did 190 meetings in 90 days, you know?
I went to meeting every single day for years. And it's like, if you struggle to find the time in your first couple of years clean to go to meetings, you ain't going to find the time later, you know? So it's like, this is the only time where it's like, you're going to build those habits. And what you do in your first couple of years clean is going to really set the tone for like later on. And I've seen some people like take it easy for the first year or two and then like dive into the steps or whatever, but it's really rare. Most people don't even make it, you know?
Yeah. You know, my first year, that's what I did is I jumped into the steps.
Conventions, whatever.
Conventions. I had a sponsor. You know, I realized, like, I remember looking back, like saying, wow, people really have fun. Like I went to a convention. I was like, these people aren't on anything, like nothing. And they're out there dancing and hanging out.
Did you go to the spiritual retreat?
Of course. Yeah. I don't think I went to the spiritual retreat until I was like a few years clean. Yeah. But I think I went like 14 years in a row. I'm telling you, man,
since we haven't had it, like I've been off. I swear to God, like the spiritual retreat is the one thing that like, no matter what's gone on in my life, I'm not going to miss it for the world. Like work has been super busy. I've been dating somebody. I've been like traveling, whatever. But like there's been something about the spiritual retreat in the Keys that has just made such an impact on my life that is like uncomparable to any other retreat or convention, you know?
For sure. Yeah, they're having trouble finding an area to keep us. So that's why it hasn't been put back on. Yeah, so all those things, man, I started to realize I could have fun in recovery. And I remember one of my first spiritual awakenings was, you know, I worked all week, got paid on Friday, and, you know, Monday I had money, you know, that started to feel good. And then I did the retail recovery thing, you know, where I'd buy sneakers and clothes, and I thought that was important to me, you know. And it was, you know, because for a long time, man, I was homeless, you know.
And that was the only indication that someone wasn't on drugs. Like the only indicator that you didn't use was that you had jewelry. Like if you had like a bracelet or like nice clothes, that meant to me that you were clean.
Sure.
So I just felt like if I wanted to show people that I was clean, I had to like put on all this shit and like buy all this clothes. And when you get clean, you don't have nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then you get that rush from buying the sneaker or whatever, you know, in the beginning. But I remember I was at a meeting once, and there was this lady who, she must have been like maybe, I don't know, 50 years old, and she was wearing all this jewelry, like a fur coat or some shit. She was like from Boca, and she had like, you know, 9 months clean. And she's like, she raised her hand and she was like, I just realized it don't matter how much clothes I buy, I'm still gonna feel empty. And when she said that, I was like, damn, this lady's sharing my story. And then she started sharing. I was like, wow, I'm going through the same thing right now. But everyone goes through that. There ain't an addict who ain't gonna go through that. You know?
Sure. Even today, man.
Today,
like, I still, you definitely try to fill that hole, you know? Yeah, man, especially early in recovery, you know? I would buy sneakers and sneak them in the house, you know? Like my girl wouldn't know that I had a new pair of sneakers.
I used to pawn my laptop and my iPod to go buy clothes that were like on sale that week and then have to save up to get my stuff out of the pawn shop. So I remember going to the pawn shop, like I thought that was normal until I started dating some girl and I told her, she was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought going to the pawn shop was like a normal thing that people do.
Yeah. Also, I remember, like they told me in the beginning, like stay out of relationships, and I didn't listen to that.
Yeah.
I ended
Well, it
up,
worked out in your favor.
yeah, for sure. I ended up getting with a girl, and it's looking back now, man. Like I think I had 7 months clean, and she got pregnant, and I didn't know if I wanted to stay clean the rest of my life. I wasn't like completely sold, on recovery. I was still like kind of teetering with my old ways, and did some, staying clean, living dirty stuff. And
yeah, I've sold drugs clean multiple times.
Yeah, me too.
Not really thinking it was like, to me, it was like no different than someone doing a pyramid scheme or something.
For sure.
It was like no different than someone selling like vitamins or something. I was just like, oh, well, I just middleman the deal and made a couple $100, like no big deal.
Yeah, same thing happened to me, something similar, and luckily I didn't use, But yeah, I ended up with this girl. She got pregnant, and like I said, I didn't know if I wanted to stay clean. I didn't know if I was responsible enough to take care of myself, more or less, a girl, be a dad and have a son, or a kid. I didn't know, I had no idea. And I look back now, and that time, man, it kind of kicked me in gear to like be a little bit more responsible. I ended up getting a job at like a treatment center right after that. And I think I had a year clean the day I got a job at this treatment center. And from that day forward, man, I can't explain it. Like I always worked like a full-time job. And then I always had like something on the side. I started like buying cars and selling cars a little bit.
Yeah, that's like how I know you is
everybody knew
cold
me.
AC.
Yeah, everybody knew me.
Yeah, so like, it's like my introduction to you was like Matt the Godfather, you had cool Jordans, you had like, Steph, and like, you had your son, and like, it was just cool to see that there was a guy in recovery that was like super solid, because there was people in recovery that like, I don't know, there was just something that like wasn't like, you couldn't trust them all the way. It felt, not that you couldn't, but like I just didn't, and there was just something about you where like everyone just had something good to say about you all the time, and you had probably like 5 years clean at the time. There was something about you that was like this dude's a super solid dude. Like he has a crazy story. He's been to prison. Like he's been clean all these years. And like, you'd be four-wheeling and mudding and like flipping cars or whatever. And you would see that like, even though, we're clean, we can still use that hustle mentality in the right way and still, do things to have fun and make money and
100%
and still live life,
Yeah, I remember realizing that, and I tell all my boys that I grew up with, I'm like, all the ways we used to hustle with drugs, you could do the same thing clean, but with something that's legit, you know, like cars. I mean, I tell people this all the time. I'm selling drugs. I have re-up money. That's all it is. You have $2,000, you make $3,000. It's just, it's re-up money,
Yeah, when I was in California, I remember one of my cousins was asking me like how I got into coke, and I was like, well, really what interested me about coke was the margins, because with weed, you'd have to sell so much weed to make $200, but with coke, you can make that off like 4 grams and you could cut it. You can't cut weed.
Right.
And my dad was just listening to the conversation. Like, I was probably just getting clean. I had like a year clean. And my dad was like, he was an entrepreneur early on, It's really the same thing. It's sales, marketing, and connections and networking,
For sure.
It's really no different than anything that's legit. The thing is that when you're using it, it's not worth it. No, like money is worth going to prison for the rest of your life. In recovery, it's like, the risks are so much less and the reward so much better. It just makes sense. So then what happened after you've been clean like 2 or 3 years?
I mean, I was working. I had, we had my son, and then, we ended up having another kid. And, like I said, like I became like a family man, like I started realizing like what was most important to me was my family, and recovery, obviously. And I just kind of adopted what I learned in the rooms, and started, I met other guys that were dads, that were good dads. And, like I met guys that weren't like running around on their girls and like, being faithful. And like, I didn't know how to do any of that, because I came from this other life. Now I started recovering without my own permission, doing a little work, obviously going to the meetings and having the sponsor and doing all that stuff. And one day, every day it just gets better. I have this thing, man, like since I've been clean, my life has literally every year, like I've had ups and downs. I've had good times and bad times. I've experienced death. I've experienced all these things. My life just gets better every year. You know, like I can be down in the dumps, and I kind of look at like what I have today is like, you know, the peace of mind, like just not waking up every day, not being dope sick, you know, not having to like figure out a way I'm going to get, you know, $20 to go get one bag, you know, to be unsick or just to get another one, you know, like having a place to, you know, lay my head, you know, a hot shower. All these things are so important to me, you know, today with the time that I got clean, just the little stuff, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So like, you know, my life progressed, man, being in recovery, you know, and working and different job opportunities. And, you know, I've always been like a little bit of a hustler. Everybody knows me back in the day. I used to buy cars and junk cars, and, you know, I started cutting grass. I did all kinds of stuff, man, scrap metal.
Yeah, I remember you cut grass and did pools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
I did pools, you know, ended up opening halfway houses, you know, and just had businesses that have done good, you know, and, you know, I think it's like almost 9 years I haven't worked for nobody, you know, and my life is good, you know, like I'm not a millionaire, but like we have everything we need, you know. My girl said this to me one day. She said, our kids live way better than we did, you know, and
sure.
And
and one thing, like, you know, not to, you know, gas you up too much, but like, you know, you could really tell how someone is by their kids. And man, your kids are so well-mannered. Like, it's really cool to see, like, you know, I've met your kids a whole bunch of times. Yeah. And it's like, dude, your eldest kid will come over to my house, sit in the corner and like start reading a book, you know? Yeah. It's like crazy to see. And to me, like, it's cool because a lot of times in recovery, you kind of just see people's kids off the chain or like they're using or whatever. And like, it's a good message that, like, you know, you can have like, you know, a regular family and break the cycle, you know?
Yeah. Anybody who's you know, that hears me share my story, like I always say, like, I'm breaking that cycle. And like, to me, if there's one gift that recovery gave me, it's that, you know, like I always share, my kids never seen me use, you know, and I don't say that to separate myself from somebody that used around their kids or whatever. I'm the guy I'm the guy that'll smoke the Xbox, you know, today. If I use today, I'll steal everything from them, you know, that's who I am. Like I shared in the beginning of my story, like they don't see like how I saw my mom. So they don't see me, you know, smoking cigarettes, drinking, disappearing for days, or arguing. Me and my girl, like we don't have those issues that, you know, I would if I was using, you know. So like I'm breaking that cycle, you know, not to say that my kids aren't kids, you know, like my little one has done stuff, you know, at his age. It is what it is. They're kids. They're going to explore, you know, and they're not guaranteed not to, you know, become addicts and get in trouble. My job is just to be a power of example, you know,
and be there.
And be there for them.
Hey, well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I love you very much. Like I always say, like you're, you know, I was talking to someone the other day and they brought you up. I was like, dude, one thing about like Matt G is like, he's just a solid dude. You could call him and say, yo, like, we got to go bury someone in the Everglades, and he'll be like, I'll be there, bro. You know, like you're just really somebody that like I really feel I could depend on. You're a great example for like me when I was getting clean. So I appreciate you, bro. Thanks for coming on the show. Hell doesn't have an exit.
Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.